Hey guys, tonight we are leaving the gentle glow of your smartphone behind and stepping back, way back, into the gaslit, soot-stained embrace of the 19th century. You find yourself not in a cozy bed, but trudging down a cobblestone street in a London that never seems to sleep, the air thick with coal smoke and the ceaseless, grinding hum of industry. The stars are blotted out by a perpetual orange haze from a million furnaces, and the night is no longer a time for rest, but another shift for the factories that drive the empire. Your eyes are gritty, your head throbs with a dull, persistent ache, and the concept of a full 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep feels like a fairy tale your weary brain can no longer remember. The world has accelerated, and your own internal clock has been shattered, leaving you stranded in a twilight of exhaustion. You are a victim of progress, and the desperate, often bizarre quest for slumber is about to become your new nightly occupation. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, feel free to post your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where in the world this strange little history is helping you unwind. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. This is the birth of modern insomnia. Before the Industrial Revolution, sleep was often a biphasic affair. A first sleep after dusk, a few hours of wakefulness in the deep night for contemplation, prayer, or even visiting neighbors, followed by a second sleep until dawn. But the relentless schedule of the factory whistle, the hissing steam engine, and the cheap, pervasive light of gas lamps bulldoze this ancient rhythm. Your life is now ruled by the clock, not the sun, and your body is struggling to adapt. The mainstream historical fact here is the profound societal shift in sleep patterns directly caused by industrialization and artificial lighting, a change documented in everything from factory timekeeping ledgers to the panicked medical journals of the era. The city itself is an engine of wakefulness. At midnight, your room is still illuminated by the flickering orange glow from the street lamp outside your window, a relatively new invention that banishes the comforting, absolute darkness your ancestors knew. The clatter of hooves and cartwheels on cobblestones is a near-constant percussion section, punctuated by the distant shriek of a train whistle, a sound that still sends a jolt of novelty and anxiety through the population. Your mattress is likely stuffed with horsehair, or, if you're less fortunate, straw crawling with pests, and your bedroom is either stifling from an overzealous fireplace or frigid from the damp cold that seeps through the brickwork. You are overstimulated, underslept, and prime prey for the burgeoning industry of somnopaths and quacks who are about to offer you a solution for a few shillings. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of insomnia was genuinely higher than in previous centuries, or if it was simply more widely discussed and medicalized due to the new pressures of urban middle-class life. But one thing is certain, the Victorians felt their sleeplessness acutely, and their desperation would lead them down some very dark and often hilarious garden paths. The quest for the perfect night's rest had begun, and it was going to get weird. So, you've had enough of staring at the floral patterns on your wallpaper in the dim gaslight, counting not sheep, but the endless responsibilities you have to face on just a few hours of fractured rest. Your nerves, as the doctor calls this vague but all-consuming feeling of being permanently on edge, are frayed. You need a solution, and the modern world has provided one, conveniently available at your local chemist or even the corner grocery. You reach for a bottle of Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, its label adorned with the cherubic face of a peacefully sleeping infant. If it can calm a teething baby, it can certainly calm you, right? You unscrew the cap and take a generous swig. It's sweet, cloyingly so, with a thick, syrupy texture that coats your throat. There's a slight bitter undertone that you dismiss as the taste of medicine. What you've just ingested is a potent cocktail of morphine and alcohol. This is the era of the patent medicine, and opium in its various forms is the undisputed king of cure-alls. It's in syrups for children, tonics for ladies' monthly complaints, and of course liniments for the sleepless and anxious. The mainstream historical fact here is the staggering, unregulated proliferation of opium-based narcotics in everyday consumables throughout the 19th century, a phenomenon that cut across all social classes and created widespread, often unknowing, addiction. You feel the warmth spread through your chest first, a comforting heat that seems to melt the cold knot of anxiety in your stomach. The sharp edges of your thoughts begin to blur. The nagging voice in your head that recites your worries softens into a distant murmur. The tension in your shoulders, which you've carried for weeks, seems to dissolve. Ah, this is it. This is the peace you've been searching for. For a few glorious hours, you drift in a heavy, dreamless void, completely unaware that you have just invited a far more tenacious guest into your life than mere insomnia. The next night, the restlessness returns, perhaps even sharper than before. It's accompanied by a new, peculiar craving, a mental itch that only another dose of that sweet syrup seems to scratch. This is the cycle of addiction establishing itself, but you don't recognize it as such. You just know the medicine worked, and now you need it again. This is the quirky, fringe tidbit that became horrifyingly mainstream. These soothing syrups were marketed not as dangerous drugs, but as harmless, benevolent helpers, often named after maternal figures to inspire trust. The same bottle that you bought for yourself was being given to restless infants by exhausted nannies and parents, creating a generation of opium eaters before they could even walk. The dosages were never listed, and the ingredients were often a closely guarded, secret formula, a merchant's right protected by law. Historians still argue whether the patent medicine magnates were cynical profiteers, fully aware of the devastation they caused, or simply products of their time, blindly applying the most potent sedative they knew of to any and all ailments. The result, however, was the same. A populace quietly, contentedly, and catastrophically dependent on narcotics to function. Your nightly ritual is no longer about willing yourself to sleep. It's about measuring out the syrup that will grant you a counterfeit version of it. The price of those few hours of chemical oblivion is a slow erosion of your health, your finances, and your will. The insomnia wasn't the problem. It was the first symptom. The cure is now the disease, and it's sitting pretty on your bedside table, promising sweet dreams with one hand, while pocketing your sanity with the other. The gentle hum of the city outside is replaced by the louder, more insistent hum of your own body, already beginning to clamor for its next fix. As the weeks blur into a syrup-hazed routine, a gnawing awareness begins to pierce the chemical fog. This dependency feels unseemly, undignified. You're a modern person, living in an age of marvels, steam power, telegraphs, the thrilling new force of electricity. Surely there must be a more scientific, a more advanced solution than a nursemaid's potion. And as if summoned by your very thoughts, you encounter him, a man with impeccable mutton chops and a compelling patter, demonstrating his electro-somniferous apparatus in a rented hall. He speaks not of mystical humors, but of galvanic currents and nervous energy. He explains, with utter conviction, that your insomnia is simply a matter of electrical imbalance within the body. Your nerves, he declares, are like undercharged telegraph wires, failing to carry the vital signal for sleep from the brain to the extremities. His machine, a beautiful mahogany box adorned with brass terminals and mysterious dials, promises to gently correct this imbalance. For a subscription fee, of course. This is the golden age of electrical quackery, where the mesmerizing, barely understood power of electricity is sold as a panacea for everything from gout to baldness to, you guessed it, sleeplessness. The mainstream historical fact here is the exploitation of public fascination with electricity by countless charlatans from the late 18th century well into the early 20th, preying on a desire for painless technological cures. You sit in a velvet-covered chair as the salesman attaches moistened cloth pads connected by thin wires to your temples and the back of your neck. He turns a handle, and a faint buzzing tingle spreads across your skin. It's not unpleasant, just strange. A soft glow emanates from a vacuum tube on the device, supposedly a visual representation of the healing energy now coursing through you. The body's own electrical fluid is being harmonized, he murmurs. The sleep center in the brain is being stimulated. You will feel a profound sense of calm. And you do, partly from the placebo effect of participating in such a modern ritual, and partly from the sheer relief of doing something that feels scientific and clean. A world away from the sticky syrup bottle. You take the device home, a smaller, less ornate version, along with a strict schedule of treatments. Every evening, you faithfully attach the electrodes, turn the crank, and feel the mild, buzzing current. For a while it seems to work. The ritual itself is soothing, a dedicated time to sit and focus on the promise of rest. The machine becomes a tangible symbol of your hope, a piece of cutting-edge technology fighting your battle for you. But the quirky fringe tidbit, the brutal truth behind the beautiful box, is that most of these devices were, at best, capable of producing only a very weak and inconsistent current, often from a simple hand-cranked magneto, and at worst, were complete fakes with batteries powering nothing but a small light to give the illusion of power. The real therapy was the theatre, the salesman's confident spiel, and the user's desperate willingness to believe. Historians still argue whether some of the more legitimate electrotherapists of the era, who used stronger, more controlled currents, ever achieved any genuine medical benefits, or if all of it was merely a spectrum of placebo and pain. Your own machine's novelty soon wears off. The buzzing becomes an annoyance, the pads chafe your skin, and the profound calm you initially felt fails to materialize night after night. The underlying exhaustion returns, now accompanied by a new frustration. You've been duped. The promise of a technological fix has fizzled out, leaving you with a handsome paperweight and a lighter purse. You stare at the intricate box, its polished wood and brass now seeming like a sarcophagus for your wasted hope. The fundamental problem remains, untouched by the gentle, fraudulent tingle. The machine doesn't harmonize your electrical fluid. It merely highlights the gap between the dazzling promise of the future and the stubborn, weary reality of your present. The failure of the electrosomniferous apparatus leaves a particular kind of bitterness, the sting of misplaced faith in progress. You feel foolish, and worse, you feel no better. But the world of Victorian remedies is a hydra. Cut off one head, and two more grow in its place. Your attention is now caught by a different kind of advertisement, one that speaks not to your nerves but to your vanity. It's for arsenic complexion wafers, and the lady in the illustration has the pale, translucent, porcelain-like skin so coveted in this era. The copy promises not only a flawless pallor, but also, and this is the crucial part for you, a calming influence on the system that promotes beauty sleep. The logic, perverse as it may seem, is seductive. Your sleepless nights are showing on your face, the dark circles, the sallow tone. What if the solution is to become more beautiful? The idea that a small daily dose of arsenic could refine the complexion and steady the nerves was a widely held belief, particularly among women. The mainstream historical fact here is the deliberate use of known poisons like arsenic and lead in cosmetics and tonics throughout the 19th century, all in pursuit of the fashionable ideal of a pale, delicate appearance. You purchase the elegantly packaged wafers. They have a faint, chalky taste, not entirely unpleasant. You take one before bed, imagining the poison as a delicate, refining fire, burning away the impurities in your blood that cause both your blemishes and your restlessness. The first few nights, you swear you feel a difference, a peculiar, light-headed calmness that isn't quite the morphine haze, but a sort of detached serenity. You check your complexion in the mirror each morning, convinced your skin is looking clearer, more luminous. You are, in fact, beginning to exhibit the early symptoms of low-grade arsenic poisoning, which can include a pale complexion due to anemia and a temporary, feverish flush. This is the quirky fringe tidbit that became a deadly beauty secret. Arsenic eating was a real, though dangerous, practice, with some individuals in certain European regions famously consuming it to build a tolerance, believing it gave them a hardy constitution and a rosy glow. You, of course, have no such tolerance. As the days turn into a week, the calm begins to feel more like lethargy. A persistent metallic taste lingers in your mouth, and a slight tremor develops in your hands. The beauty sleep you're getting is increasingly a leaden, comatose state from which you wake feeling groggy and unrefreshed, your head pounding. Historians still argue whether the popularity of such dangerous products was driven more by ruthless marketing that preyed on societal pressures, or by a genuine widespread ignorance of biochemistry and the cumulative, insidious nature of slow poisoning among the general public. You are now trapped in a new kind of calculus, weighing the faint perceived improvement in your reflection against the slowly mounting cost to your health. The insomnia has been joined by nausea and muscle cramps. The cure is quite literally killing you, cell by cell, all in the name of beauty and rest. The elegant wafer you place on your tongue each night is not a key to peaceful slumber. It's a slow-acting toxin, and your body is the testing ground for its grim efficacy. The pursuit of sleep has led you to willingly poison yourself. A quiet, respectable suicide performed nightly in the name of propriety and a good night's rest. The arsenic wafers have left you with a persistent, unsettling queasiness that lingers throughout the day, a constant reminder that your search for rest is actively harming you. But the world, it seems, has a cure for every consequence of its previous cures. Your own troubles, however, feel trivial when you visit your sister and see her struggling with her newborn. The infant is teething, its cries a sharp, piercing sound of pure misery that grates on everyone's already frayed nerves. The lack of sleep in the household is now a collective agony. The family physician, a man of modern methods, makes a house call. He clucks his tongue sympathetically and then, from his black bag, produces a device that looks like a small rubber bellows with a delicate mouthpiece. He calls it a morphine inhaler for infantile restlessness. He explains that a small, measured amount of morphine powder can be puffed into the air, and as the baby breathes, it will inhale the sedative vapor, calming its distress and granting everyone a reprieve. The mainstream historical fact here is the shocking, casual use of powerful narcotics to manage children's behavior in the 19th century, a practice born of a lack of safer alternatives and a desire for quiet, orderly households at any cost. You watch, a cold knot forming in your stomach that has nothing to do with arsenic, as your sister, desperate and exhausted, agrees. The doctor demonstrates, giving the bulb a gentle squeeze that releases a faint, almost invisible cloud near the infant's face. The frantic cries subside into whimpers, and then, within minutes, the baby slips into a deep, unnaturally still slumber. The silence in the nursery is immediate and profound, and your sister weeps with relief. It is a terrifyingly effective solution. You hold the device later. It's lightweight, almost toy-like, a stark contrast to the profound effect it wields. This is the quirky, fringe tidbit that exposes the dark underbelly of Victorian domesticity. The deliberate sedation of children was not just a secretive act, but a medically sanctioned one. So-called soothing syrups were the blunt instrument, but this inhaler represents a more refined and therefore more insidious approach, masking neglect with the veneer of medical science. The line between care and convenience was perilously thin, and for a sleep-deprived mother at the end of her tether, that line was often invisible. Historians still argue whether the physicians who promoted these devices were genuinely convinced of their safety for delicate infant constitutions, or if they were simply providing a service demanded by parents who viewed children as miniature, often inconvenient adults who needed to be managed. You look at the peacefully sleeping baby, its breathing slow and deep, and you feel a chill that has nothing to do with the drafty room. This is not the healthy sleep of a contented child. It is a chemical paralysis. You think of your own reliance on Mrs. Winslow's syrup, the craving that still whispers to you in the night, and you see a potential future for this tiny, vulnerable person, a life tethered to a substance before it can even speak. The quest for sleep, you realize, isn't just your own personal battle. It's a generational curse, passed down in tinctures and powders and puffs of vapor, silencing the cries of the present at the expense of the future. The memory of that unnaturally still infant haunts you, a tiny, sedated ghost at the edge of your consciousness. It makes your own quest for sleep feel both self-indulgent and tainted. But just as despair begins to set in, a new, dazzling promise appears on the horizon, one that seems to wash away the grime of opium and arsenic with its pure, scientific glow. The newspapers are full of it, radium. It's not just an element, it's a miracle. Discovered by the Curies, it seems to possess its own life, its own energy, emitting light and heat seemingly from nothing. And where there is a miracle, the hucksters are never far behind. Soon, advertisements appear for the ethereal radium bedside relaxer, a small, elegantly crafted jar containing a radium-infused compound. The instructions are simple. Place it on your nightstand before you retire. As you sleep, its stimulating effluvia and gentle, penetrating rays will recharge your depleted nervous system, harmonize your brainwaves, and bathe you in a curative luminescence that guarantees deep, restorative slumber. The mainstream historical fact here is the brief but intense radium craze of the early 20th century, where the radioactive element was added with reckless abandon to everything from toothpaste and chocolate to, yes, quack medical devices hailed as a tonic and a cure-all. You acquire one of these jars, paying a premium for this piece of the future. In the darkness of your bedroom, it gives off an unearthly greenish-blue glee, a soft ghost light that illuminates the contours of your water glass and the edge of your bedside book. It's beautiful, mesmerizing. You lie there staring at this bottled piece of a star, feeling modern and hopeful. You imagine the cosmic energy pouring into you, realigning your tired atoms. The faint glow is a lullaby for the scientific age. This is the quirky, fringe tidbit that represents the absolute peak of radioactive naivety. The belief that because radium's energy was natural and powerful, it must be beneficial. Companies sold radioactive drinking water called Radithor, and there were even radium-lined jars to charge water overnight, creating a healthy radioactive tonic. The relaxer on your nightstand is a direct descendant of this madness. You don't know, you can't know, that the pretty glow is the visual evidence of atomic decay, that the curative rays are subatomic bullets tearing through your cells, causing damage that is cumulative and irreversible. Historians still argue whether the purveyors of these radioactive consumer goods were themselves deceived by the initial, optimistic scientific reports, or if they were knowingly selling slow death for a quick profit, exploiting a public enthralled by scientific discovery but utterly ignorant of its dangers. For a few weeks, the placebo effect is powerful. The simple act of believing in this advanced technology makes you feel more in control, and you do seem to sleep a little better, lulled by the novelty and the faint, ethereal light. But then a new fatigue sets in, different from your usual insomnia. It's a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. You develop a small, persistent sore on your lip. You can't explain, right where you might sip water from the glass sitting next to the glowing jar all night. The relaxer continues to gleam, a silent, beautiful, and malevolent companion in the dark. You bought a source of energy, but you are being systematically drained. The promise of cosmic rest has delivered a personal, quiet apocalypse, one cell at a time. The radium jar's ghostly glow begins to feel less like a comfort, and more like a malevolent eye watching you in the dark. A bit like that one friend who stares just a little too long during conversations. This sentiment aligns uncomfortably well with the strange, persistent sore on your lip that's starting to look suspiciously like a tiny, glowing crater. You pack the device away in a cupboard, handling it with a cloth as if it were cursed ancient pottery, which, given it's slowly bombarding you with alpha particles, isn't far from the truth. You decide you need a solution that is mechanical, tangible, something that applies direct, physical force to the problem, because if the 19th century has taught you anything, it's that when in doubt, apply brute force. You find your brute in the pages of a scientific magazine, advertised as the cerebrosomatic compressor. It sounds impressively Latin, which is always a good sign. The illustration shows a helmet-like device of polished leather and brass screws, looking like something a deep-sea diver might wear to a very formal, very cramped opera. The theory, espoused by a certain school of neurologists who were clearly also part-time corset makers, is that insomnia is a result of cerebral congestion, an excess of blood flow to the brain, causing a feverish overactivity of the mind. The helmet, by applying a gentle, consistent pressure to the cranium, will supposedly redistribute this blood flow, like squeezing a tube of toothpaste from the middle, relieving the pressure, and thus inducing a state of calm readiness for sleep. The mainstream historical fact here is the Victorian fascination with mechanical solutions to biological problems, and the very real, if misguided practice of mechanotherapy, which used various contraptions to manipulate the body's structures, operating on the principle that the human body is basically a complex clock that just needs a good whack sometimes. The device arrives in a lovely velvet-lined box. It smells of leather and misplaced confidence. That evening, you strap it on, tightening the brass screws with a little key. Click, click, click. With each turn, you feel a firm, encompassing pressure closing in around your entire head. It's not painful, but it is profoundly strange, a constant reminder of its presence that seems at first to be the exact opposite of relaxing. You look in the mirror and see a strange, steampunk astronaut prepared for a journey into the land of Nod, or perhaps a very well-dressed nutcracker. Your own personal thought cage is officially locked and loaded. This is the quirky, fringe tidbit of direct physical intervention. While head massagers existed, the cerebrosomatic compressor represents a more aggressive, pseudo-physiological approach. It operates on the same principle as the now debunked restraining chairs and spinal stretchers used in asylums. The idea that a disordered mind could be corrected by physically manipulating and containing the body that housed it, like silencing a noisy radio by sitting on it. You lie in bed, the weight of the helmet a solid, unignorable presence on the pillow. It's like trying to sleep next to a small, polite, but very heavy animal. The initial strangeness gives way to a peculiar sensation. The pressure does seem to mute the world a little. The constant internal monologue of your anxieties. Did I lock the door? Is that a new liver spot? What is the political future of the Balkan states? Becomes slightly muffled, as if someone has placed a hand over its mouth and whispered, "Shh," the fancy hat is thinking. It's a sensation of being physically contained, and for a mind that feels like it's spilling over with worries like an overfilled book bag. That containment is perversely a relief. It's hard to spiral into an existential crisis when your skull feels like it's getting a permanent, full-head handshake. Historians still argue whether any of these mechanical therapies provided genuine relief beyond the powerful placebo effect of undergoing a structured, scientific treatment, or if they merely provided a physical sensation so bizarre and distracting that your brain simply forgot to be anxious about anything else. It's the medical equivalent of solving a software bug by hitting the computer monitor. You eventually drift off, not into a natural sleep, but into a heavy, pressured stupor. It's less floating on a cloud and more sinking into a vat of warm pudding while wearing an iron mask. You wake in the morning with a dull headache and deep lines imprinted on your forehead and cheeks from the helmet's padding, giving you the distinguished, corrugated appearance of a confused waffle. The sleep you got was not restorative. It was a state of forced quiescence, as if your brain had been put in a vice for the night and told to behave. You've traded one form of discomfort for another, mistaking the heavy hand of mechanical suppression for the gentle touch of slumber. The helmet hasn't solved your cerebral congestion. It has only given your insomnia a new physical shape to press against your skull all night long. A literal pain in the head to replace the metaphorical one. The headache from the compressor helmet lingers like a bad memory, a dull throb that makes the very idea of strapping it on again seem like a form of torture. You are once more at a loss. It is a chemist, a man who seems more pragmatic than the salesmen and physicians you've encountered, who offers the next solution. He speaks in low, confident tones about a compound called chloral hydrate. It is not a syrup, not a vapor, not a ray or a pressure. It is a crystalline powder, a pure modern chemical, first synthesized in a laboratory. It is, he assures you, the most reliable and fast-acting hypnotic known to science. A small dose dissolved in water will bring on sleep within half an hour. A sleep so profound and dreamless it was nicknamed a Mickey Fin in less reputable circles. The mainstream historical fact here is the introduction of chloral hydrate in the mid-19th century as one of the first synthetic sedative hypnotic drugs, marking a significant moment in the history of psychopharmacology and becoming widely used in both legitimate medicine and as a knockout drop. You acquire a small bottle of the crystals. That night, with a sense of grim determination, you mix the prescribed amount into a glass of water. It has a slightly bitter, unpleasant taste, but you swallow it down, a soldier following orders. The effect is not the warm, creeping haze of morphine. It is a swift and decisive ambush. One moment you are sitting up in bed, reading. The next, a leaden weight seems to drop behind your eyes. The book slips from your fingers. There is no gradual drift, no gentle surrender. You are simply switched off. For the first time in months, you experience what feels like a complete and total absence of consciousness. You do not dream. You do not turn over. You do not exist for those hours. When you wake, it is not a gentle emergence, but a sudden groggy resurfacing, as if you've been dredged up from the bottom of a deep, stagnant pond. Your mouth is dry. Your head is thick with a toxic-feeling fog, and a profound sense of disorientation hangs over you for the first hour of the day. This is the chloral hangover, a well-known and dreaded side effect. This is the quirky, fringe tidbit that reveals the drug's dark legacy. While it was a medical staple, its reputation was famously sealed by its association with the notorious serial killer Dr. Thomas Neal Cream, who used it to poison his victims. Its fast-acting, powerful nature made it the perfect weapon for those with malicious intent, a shadow that always lingered around its clinical use. You continue the regimen, trapped in a new cycle. The promise of that absolute chemical nullity is so seductive after the long struggle that you willingly pay the price the next morning. Historians still argue whether the medical community was too quick to embrace chloral hydrate, downplaying its addictive potential and nasty side effects in their relief at having a predictable, non-opiate sedative, or if its dangers were simply the accepted cost of doing battle with severe insomnia in an era with few other options. The drug doesn't cure your insomnia, It merely executes it night after night with a chemical guillotine. And with each use, you feel a little less like yourself upon waking, the core of your consciousness taking longer to reassemble. You have found the closest thing to death that can be purchased in a bottle, and you are calling it sleep. The chloral hydrate hangovers become a new kind of morning ritual, a thick chemical fog that takes longer to burn off each day. You feel like a ghost in your own life, sleepwalking through the daylight hours just to earn that few hours of brutal oblivion. It's a friend, noticing your pallor and distant manner, who suggests a different path entirely. It's not a problem of the body, she whispers conspiratorially over tea, but of the magnetic fluid of the mind. You need to see a mesmerist. And so you find yourself in a dimly lit parlor, seated before a man with an intense, unblinking gaze. He is a practitioner of animal magnetism, a philosophy descended from Franz Anton Mesmer, who believed an invisible magnetic force flowed through all living things, and that illness, including sleeplessness, was a blockage of this flow. The mainstream historical fact here is the immense popularity of mesmerism in the 19th century as a form of therapy and entertainment, a precursor to modern hypnosis that blurred the lines between science, showmanship, and the supernatural. The mesmerist doesn't offer you a drug or a device. He offers his own personal magnetism. He sits close to you, making slow, rhythmic passes with his hands just inches from your body, never quite touching you, his eyes locked with yours. He speaks in a low, monotonous drone about relaxation, heaviness, and the rebalancing of your vital energies. He might even use a magnet, stroking the air around your head with it, claiming to be directing the magnetic currents within you. The goal is to induce a trance-like state, a mesmeric sleep, which he promises will reset your natural capacity for slumber. At first, it feels absurd. You are acutely aware of the performative nature of it all, the theatricality of the passes, the over-earnest tone of his voice, but the combination of the dim light, the monotony, and your own profound desperation begins to work on you. Your eyelids grow heavy. The critical part of your mind, so often abuzz with anxiety, begins to quieten. This is the quirky, fringe tidbit that highlights the power of suggestion. While the theory of animal magnetism was eventually debunked, the techniques developed by mesmerists were remarkably effective at inducing altered states of consciousness, directly leading to the development of therapeutic hypnosis. You don't know if magnetic fluid is real, but you cannot deny the strange, heavy calm that is settling over you. It feels different from the chemical bludgeoning of chloral hydrate, softer, more natural. Historians still argue whether the successes of mesmerism were due to the charisma and force of will of the practitioner, the profound suggestibility of desperate patients, or if they were tapping into genuine, if poorly understood, psychological mechanisms for relaxation and focus. When the session ends, you feel deeply relaxed, almost groggy. That night, to your astonishment, you fall asleep more easily than you have in months. For a few days, it seems like the answer, but the effect is fleeting. The memory of the mesmerist's voice fades. The magnetic charge apparently dissipates, and soon you are back in your own bed, in your own silent room, trying and failing to replicate that trance state on your own. You realize you haven't been cured. You've just become dependent on a different kind of external agent. Not a bottle, but a person. The search for sleep has led you from your own body to the magnetic charisma of a stranger, and left you there, stranded once more. The fleeting success of mesmerism leaves you with a frustrating paradox. The mind can be convinced to sleep, but you lack the key to convince your own. What you need, you decide, is not subtlety, but force. A physical intervention so decisive it will jolt your nervous system into compliance. You find it advertised as the percussive revitalizer, a wide leather belt attached by a flexible drive shaft to a small, powerful electric motor. The theory, promoted by a new breed of vibratory therapists, is that insomnia is a form of stagnation. Your nerves are not overactive, but stuck, like a skipping record. The rapid, mechanical oscillation of the belt, strapped firmly around your waist or back, will literally shake your nervous system loose, breaking the cycle of tension and promoting a state of healthy fatigue. The mainstream historical fact here is the brief but intense fad for whole-body vibration machines in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, with proponents like Dr. John Harvey Kellogg of cornflake fame being a major advocate, using them in his Battle Creek Sanitarium for everything from constipation to hysteria. You acquire one of these contraptions. It is a fearsome-looking thing, all polished wood, gleaming metal, and a thick, serious-looking belt. You strap it on, the cold leather tight against your nightclothes, and turn the switch. The motor whirs to life with a low growl that quickly escalates into a violent, juddering roar. The vibration is not gentle. It is a brutal, insistent shaking that rattles your teeth, blurs your vision, and turns your bones into tuning forks. You hold on to the bed frame, convinced you are being physically dismantled. This is the quirky, fringe tidbit of aggressive mechanotherapy. While Kellogg used vibratory chairs, the home use belt was a more direct, and often more violent, application of the principle. Advertisements showed serene ladies reading while being violently shaken, the very picture of genteel science. The reality in your bedroom is far less serene. It feels less like therapy and more like a minor industrial accident happening specifically to your spine. After the prescribed 10-minute session, you switch the machine off. The sudden silence is deafening. Your body, however, continues to hum with an internal vibration, a phantom shaking that persists for several minutes. And then, something strange happens. The aftermath of the violence is a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. It's the weariness of someone who has been through a physical ordeal. Your muscles feel loose, almost liquid. The constant buzzing anxiety in your mind seems to have been literally shaken out of you, replaced by a simple physical need for rest. Historians still argue whether these machines provided any genuine physiological benefit, beyond the fatigue induced by subjecting the body to a low-grade pummeling, or if they were just another form of dramatic, distracting stimulus that left patients too worn out to be anxious. You collapse into bed and, for the first time in weeks, fall asleep almost immediately from sheer physical capitulation. It works, but it feels less like a cure and more like a defeat. You haven't soothed your nervous system. You have bludgeoned it into temporary submission. The price of this sleep is a feeling of having been in a fight and the growing dread of the next evening, when you will have to strap yourself once more to the machine that treats your body. The violent tremors of the revitalizer belt leave you with a peculiar soreness the next day. A deep muscular fatigue that makes the very thought of repeating the process feel like a form of punishment. Exhaustion as a path to sleep now seems a brutal and unsustainable strategy. Just as you are about to resign yourself to a lifetime of chloral hydrate hangovers, a new and seemingly more civilized theory crosses your path. You attend a public lecture given by a distinguished, if severe, dietary guru who posits a radical idea. Insomnia is a disease of modern digestion. The complex carbohydrates, the sugars, the rich sauces, they are all poisoning your gut, and a poisoned gut, he declares, leads directly to a poisoned, restless mind. The solution is not a drug or a machine, but a radical simplification of your diet. He prescribes the all-meat regimen for neurological calm. For a period of several weeks, you are to consume nothing but lean beef, mutton, and water. No bread, no vegetables, no fruit, no tea or coffee. The mainstream historical fact here is the 19th century proliferation of extreme fad diets, often promoted by self-styled experts who blamed modern food for modern ailments, with the all-meat diet being one of the more austere and protein-focused examples. The first day is a struggle. You eat your plain broiled steak for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It is monotonous and unsatisfying. By the second day, a strange mental clarity does indeed descend. But it is the clarity of starvation, a sharp, hungry focus that has little to do with calm. Your breath develops a faint sour smell, ketosis. Though you have no name for it, this is the quirky, fringe tidbit of nutritional extremism. While most dietary advice of the era focused on bland foods like graham crackers, the all-meat diet was its own puritanical cult, promising to return the body to a primal, hunter-like state free of the inflammatory corruptions of agriculture. You persist, driven by the promise of a natural cure. The initial hunger pangs subside, replaced by a constant low-level nausea and a profound craving for a simple piece of bread or a potato. Historians still argue whether the perceived benefits of such restrictive diets were due to the elimination of actual allergens or irritants, or simply the result of the body being so physically stressed and deprived of its usual fuel that it lacked the energy for anxious rumination. After a week, you are gaunt and irritable. The world has taken on a grey, joyless hue. You do, however, find yourself falling asleep more easily at night. But it is not the sleep of restoration. It is the sleep of collapse, the body shutting down from a lack of usable energy. You are too depleted to stay awake. Your dreams are strange, vivid visions of feasts you cannot touch. The diet has not cured your insomnia. It has merely replaced it with a different kind of misery, one that permeates your every waking moment. The quest for sleep has led you to deny yourself one of life's fundamental pleasures, and the slumber you gain feels less like a reward and more like a symptom of starvation. The all-meat diet leaves you gaunt, foul-tempered, and dreaming of vegetables with a passion bordering on the obsessive. You break the regimen with a simple piece of buttered toast, which feels like a religious experience. But the underlying exhaustion remains, now compounded by the lingering weakness from your self-imposed malnutrition. Desperate for a cleanse, a literal breath of fresh air, you turn to a therapy that promises to purify the very source of life, your lungs. You consult a new specialist who diagnoses you with miasmatic congestion, a vague catch-all for the toxic vapors of the city that have settled in your respiratory system and, by extension, clouded your brain. His prescription is creosote inhalation. Creosote, a thick, oily liquid distilled from wood tar, is a known antiseptic and preservative used to protect railway sleepers and telephone poles from rot. The medical logic, such as it is, posits that if it can kill the organisms that decay wood, it can surely purify the corrupting influences in your airways. The mainstream historical fact here is the widespread use of harsh antiseptics like creosote and carbolic acid in early inhalant therapies, a brutal application of the germ theory that failed to distinguish between harmful bacteria and delicate lung tissue. You acquire a small porcelain inhaler. You add a few drops of the dark, pungent liquid to the water reservoir, light the small spirit lamp beneath it, and wait. Soon, a sharp medicinal vapor, smelling powerfully of a freshly tarred road or a smoked ham, begins to fill the chamber. You place your mouth over the tube and inhale deeply. The sensation is immediate and violent. The fumes feel like a chemical fire in your sinuses and throat, so acrid it makes your eyes water and triggers a coughing fit. It is the absolute opposite of soothing. Yet, you persist, believing this intense discomfort is a sign of the therapy's potency, that the bad humors are being burned away. This is the quirky, fringe tidbit of industrial strength inhalation. While milder inhalants like eucalyptus were common, creosote represented the heavy artillery, a therapy that felt like it was working precisely because it was so aggressively unpleasant. The theory was that the body's violent reaction, the coughing, the tearing up, was part of the cleansing process. After several minutes, your head feels light, not from calm, but from a combination of mild oxygen deprivation and the toxic shock to your system. Your throat is raw. Historians still argue whether any practitioners genuinely believed in the efficacy of such dangerous treatments for respiratory complaints, or if they were merely applying the most powerful antiseptics they knew in a desperate, and often harmful, attempt to do something. That night, you are so physically battered by the experience, your respiratory tract so irritated, that your body's priority shifts from anxiety to simple physical recovery. You fall into a heavy, stunned sleep, but you wake feeling as if you've spent the night breathing smog from a factory chimney, a deep rawness in your chest. The purification has left you feeling poisoned in a new way. The quest for a clear mind through a clear airway has instead filled your lungs with the choking ghost of a tar kettle. The raw chemical burn of creosote lingers in your throat for days, a painful reminder that purity, in the Victorian sense, is a punishing ideal. You feel battered, inside and out, like a piece of meat that's been tenderized with a hammer made of science and regret. Your sleep is little more than a stunned retreat from the day's various therapies, a comatose state you stumble into out of sheer defensive necessity. It is at this low ebb, while you're coughing in a way that sounds like you're trying to start a lawnmower, that a well-meaning acquaintance, concerned by your pallor, which now has a faint, greenish undertone from the creosote, suggests a more holistic approach. Hydrotherapy. "Oh, it's wonderfully calming," she trills. "So natural. Let's be perfectly clear. This is not a relaxing soak in a warm bath with scented oils and a rubber duck. This is water used as a weapon. You present yourself at a hydrotherapeutic institute, a place that smells aggressively clean, like a hospital that's just won an argument. A stern nurse in a starched uniform so crisp it could probably slice bread instructs you to disrobe and lie on a cold porcelain table. You comply, feeling about as dignified as a plucked chicken on a butcher's block. She then produces a large, coarse linen sheet, the kind you'd use to sand furniture, and soaks it in a tub of water you're fairly certain was imported directly from the Arctic Circle. Without a word of comfort, or a single line of a soothing lullaby, She wraps you tightly in this freezing, dripping shroud from your neck to your ankles, with the efficiency of someone packing a fragile and slightly annoying vase for international shipping. This, she explains in a tone usually reserved for reading train timetables, is the wet sheet pack. The theory, pioneered by health reformers with a seemingly deep-seated grudge against comfort, is that your insomnia is a fever of the nervous system, an overexcitation that must be countered with a profound shock to the body. The initial intense cold of the pack will drive the blood inward, away from the overactive periphery and brain, calming the entire system. The mainstream historical fact here is the rise of the hydrotherapy movement in the 19th century, with institutions like those run by Sebastian Kneipp and others popularizing the use of cold water applications, wraps and douches for a vast range of ailments, operating on the principle that what doesn't kill you probably makes you wish it had. The initial shock is so extreme, it steals the breath from your lungs. You gasp, your entire body seizing up against the cold. Your mind, which was a moment ago buzzing with anxieties about the economy and that weird noise the drainpipe makes, is now broadcasting a single, clear signal. You are shivering violently, a prisoner in a clammy, freezing cocoon, rethinking every life choice that led you to this moment. You are, for all intents and purposes, a human popsicle in a linen wrapper. Just as you feel you cannot bear it another second and are about to scream for someone to just light you on fire for warmth, a strange transformation begins to occur. Your body, in a desperate all-hands-on-deck attempt to warm itself, floods with blood internally. The violent shivering subsides, replaced by a deep, paradoxical warmth that seems to glow from your core. It's a fantastic feeling, a bit like being reborn, if being born involved first being flash-frozen by a vengeful ice god. The nurse, seeing you've passed the initial shock phase, leaves you alone in the quiet, tiled room, trussed up like a mummy who opted for a damp burial. The intense physical sensation of the cold and the subsequent epic battle against it has completely monopolized your attention. There is no room for anxious thoughts. Your entire consciousness is focused on the simple, primal battle between cold and warmth. You haven't felt this mentally clear in years, mostly because your brain is too busy managing this internal thermal civil war to bother with anything else. This is the quirky, fringe tidbit of extreme hydrotherapy. While some treatments were gentle, the wet sheet pack was a form of sensory deprivation and shock treatment, forcibly redirecting the patient's focus from mental distress to overwhelming physical sensation. It's the psychiatric equivalent of dealing with a crying baby by giving it a lemon to suck on. Historians still argue whether the perceived benefits of such harsh treatments came from the physiological response of the circulatory system, or were purely psychological, a result of the patient's belief in the rigorous, natural cure and the total disruption of their habitual thought patterns, a kind of mental reset achieved via controlled drowning. After what feels like an eternity, or one very long, cold commercial break in the show of your life, the nurse returns and unwraps you. The feeling of the air on your skin is intensely vivid, almost painfully so. You are then given a brisk rub-down with a rough towel by the nurse, who applies the same enthusiasm as someone scrubbing a stubborn stain off a floor. You feel utterly spent, physically and mentally hollowed out, like a vessel that's been scoured clean with ice and sandpaper. That night, you sleep, not because you are calm, but because you are a shipwreck survivor washed ashore, too exhausted by the ordeal to do anything but lose consciousness. The therapy hasn't healed your nerves, it has simply overwhelmed them, bludgeoning your anxiety into submission with a frozen blanket. It's rest, yes, but it's the rest of the vanquished. Deep, systemic exhaustion from the wet sheet pack is a different creature from your usual wired, tired state. It's a fatigue that feels earned, like you've single-handedly wrestled a polar bear into a linen closet and then taken a nap in there with it. For a few days, your sleep is the heavy, unthinking slumber of someone who has performed hard physical labor, like a lumberjack or a professional mattress tester. You don't so much fall asleep as you undergo a controlled collapse, but the city, with its soot and its sleepless energy, a constant, low-grade psychic assault of clattering hooves, shouting newsboys, and the general sense that everyone is making money while you're not, quickly leaches that hard-won calm away. It's like your soul is a sponge and London is a giant, grimy hand that wrings it out every morning. The final, Desperate option for someone of your means. Having exhausted the possibilities of poison, vibration, and ice-based mummification, is to flee the city altogether. You take the advice of your physician, who peers at you over his spectacles and declares you need bracing country air, a phrase that sounds wonderfully wholesome, like something that would come with a side of fresh butter and rosy cheeks. You book a stay at a country air health resort, a sanatorium famously built for those suffering from nervous exhaustion and pulmonary complaints, which is basically a fancy way of saying for people driven mad by modern life. The journey by train is a welcome escape, the grimy urban landscape gradually giving way to green fields and the occasional confused-looking sheep. It's all very picturesque. You feel a flicker of hope. But when you arrive, you feel a slight unease, a feeling that starts in your shoes. The air is certainly different, thicker, heavier, with a damp, earthy smell that suggests a great many things are decomposing nearby with gusto. The resort is beautiful, a sprawling estate of manicured gardens and grand architecture. But the land feels soft underfoot with a distinct squelch. It's like walking on a very expensive, slightly damp sponge. You learn from a fellow guest, a gaunt man who is constantly dabbing his forehead with a handkerchief, that the entire property was built on a recently drained swamp, chosen for its humor-balancing miasmatic qualities and its abundance of ozone-rich air. The mainstream historical fact here is the 19th century medical belief in the curative power of specific geographic locations, leading to a boom in health resorts, many of which were, unfortunately, situated in areas now known to be hotspots for diseases like malaria or, in this case, in damp lowlands where mold and airborne allergens thrived. The intention was to get away from the industrial filth, but the understanding of what constituted good air was still deeply, tragically flawed. They basically thought city air is bad because it's full of coal smoke and despair. Swamp air is good because it's earthy, it has character. Your room is spacious and has a lovely view of the misty, boggy grounds. It is also perpetually damp. A faint, musty odor clings to the draperies, a scent you can only describe as grandmother's attic, if grandmother was a frog. By the second day, you notice a new, rattling quality to your breath, as if a tiny, maraca-playing insect has taken up residence in your chest. The curative environment is, in fact, a perfect breeding ground for mold and other allergens, a veritable five-star hotel for spores. This is the quirky, fringe tidbit of misplaced convalescence. The tragic irony of Victorian health resorts, where the wealthy would pay a premium to stay in locations that were often less healthy than the polluted cities they fled, all based on pseudoscientific theories about topography and air quality. You've essentially paid good money to vacation in a petri dish. The days are filled with enforced rest, gentle strolls along boggy paths where you half expect to see a dinosaur peek out from behind a gnarled tree, and the consumption of bland, healthful foods that make you long for the vibrant, life-shortening excitement of a London pie. Yet you feel worse, not better. Your sleep, that fickle friend, is now fractured by fits of coughing that sound like you're trying to start a motorcycle, and a new, low-grade fever has joined your old companion, exhaustion. You came here to escape one illness and are leaving with a complementary second one. Historians still argue whether the doctors who recommended these swampy retreats were simply following the prevailing, incorrect theories about miasma with genuine, if misguided, concern, or if the business of running a lucrative sanatorium for desperate, wealthy hypochondriacs simply outweighed any petty concerns about the actual biological environment. You have traded the man-made poison of the city for the natural poison of the marsh. The quest for restorative sleep has led you to a beautifully appointed sickbed, where the air itself seems to be conspiring against your lungs, whispering sweet nothings filled with mildew and microbes. The final, desperate flight from insomnia has grounded you in a place where the cure is quite literally in the air you breathe, and it is slowly, steadily, making you ill in an entirely new way. The gentle hum you sought is now the wheeze in your own chest, a nightly rattling reminder that you have paid a significant sum of money to be gently, naturally poisoned. The days are filled with enforced rest, gentle strolls along boggy paths where you half expect to see a dinosaur peek out from behind a gnarled tree, and the consumption of bland, healthful foods that make you long for the vibrant, life-shortening excitement of a London pie. Yet you feel worse, not better. Your sleep, that fickle friend, is now fractured by fits of coughing that sound like you're trying to start a motorcycle, and a new low-grade fever has joined your old companion, exhaustion. You came here to escape one illness and are leaving with a complementary second one. Historians still argue whether the doctors who recommended these swampy retreats were simply following the prevailing, incorrect theories about miasma with genuine, if misguided, concern, or if the business of running a lucrative sanatorium for desperate, wealthy hypochondriacs simply outweighed any petty concerns about the actual biological environment. You have traded the man-made poison of the city for the natural poison of the marsh. The quest for restorative sleep has led you to a beautifully appointed sickbed, where the air itself seems to be conspiring against your lungs, whispering sweet nothings filled with mildew and microbes. The final desperate flight from insomnia has grounded you in a place where the cure is quite literally in the air you breathe, and it is slowly, steadily, making you ill in an entirely new way. The gentle hum you sought is now the wheeze in your own chest, a nightly rattling reminder that you have paid a significant sum of money to be gently, naturally poisoned. Historians still argue whether the Victorians' relentless drive to cure themselves was a noble, if misguided, pursuit of betterment, or a pathological inability to accept the inherent discomforts of the human condition. Especially in the face of unprecedented social change, the debate will continue in academic journals. But for you, in this quiet moment, the answer is clear. You have been fighting a battle on terrain created by the very cures you sought. You blow out the gas lamp, embracing the true deep darkness for the first time in months. You listen to your own ragged breath, the faint sounds of the city, and you simply let them be. You are not trying to sleep. You are just being in the night. And in that surrender, in that final, exhausted release of the struggle, you feel a tiny, fragile seed of genuine calm take root in the weary soil of your soul. The frantic energy of the chase has finally bled away, leaving behind a quiet, hollowed-out space where true rest might, at last, find a place to settle. The parade of potions and machines, the promises of wizards and scientists, all fade into a distant, almost dreamlike memory. There are no more battles to be fought tonight, no more solutions to be applied. Your body, for all its wear and tear, is still here, breathing, enduring. The hum of the city is no longer an enemy to be defeated, but simply a sound, a lullaby for a modern world, a constant like the rush of a distant river or the wind through trees. All the struggles, the desperate searches for a single, perfect answer, they all melt away now into the soft, accepting darkness of your room. There is no more need to fight the wakefulness, to resist the quiet thoughts that drift through your mind. They are just part of the night, as natural as the moon outside your window. Let the weight of the blankets anchor you. Let the slow, steady rhythm of your own heart be the only clock you need. Every worry, every remembered failure, every echo of a salesman's pitch can be acknowledged and then released, left to dissolve in the gentle, non-judgmental stillness. You have traveled a long and strange road to arrive here at this simple moment of surrender, and here, in the quiet aftermath of the storm, without any cure, without any machine, without any potion, sleep finally, softly, begins to creep in at the edges, not as a conquest, but as a welcome guest returning home. Sweet dreams.